Hello, this is Front Row on The Bigger Picture. I'm Lee Chui Lin. The term art economy to many artists may be something strange and alien. Perhaps the term seems to suggest two contradictory impulses, the creative one that challenges the system, and then the impulse that creates a subsystem within that larger one, which artists are questioning, interrogating, sometimes fighting. The 1980s saw the beginnings of the study of cultural industry and the economy of cultural institutions such as museums, libraries, even historic buildings. Ask those in the know in KL, gallery owners, collectors, and even some artists, if there's a spike in art galleries, art auctions, art exhibitions, including large international ones, and they will all nod their heads. So there's money to be made in this economy, and my guests to help us understand this are Patrice Vallette, the owner of the gallery that carries his name, and Charlotte Cousins, an art scholar and curator. Welcome to the show. Firstly then, how would you explain what art economy is?
Well, actually everything starts, we are here because also we had this vision and this not interrogation, but this willingness to get people together to discuss about this, actually. And everything started from this conference then we had in Marriott Hotel in KL on the 24th and 25th of March. And the idea was really to get the professionals and also the economic players, corporations, institutions together to discuss about all these different subjects. To get to not a conclusion, but maybe to get some ideas and better ideas about how we can create platforms, how we can create an awareness. But this was just the beginning, and this is why we actually now looking at our next forum to continue discussions.
So what did you come up with at that forum then? In the initial discussion, did you kind of lay down what everyone agrees an art economy is, or, what are the terms of it?
Well, at the conference, the keynote speaker was named Claude Mollard. He's written a very interesting book that was just translated into Bahasa Malay called Cultural Engineering. The book was launched at the date of the conference as well. And in it, he sketches out what an art economy system might look like, all the various players who might be involved, and basically how this ecosystem of players works together to create culture.
Why is an understanding of this economy necessary among artists, among gallery owners, among curators?
Well, I think we're in an industry, and we have people here who, if we talk about the artists, they are looking forward to get more support, to get more platform, to get more to get exhibited, not only locally but also internationally. So we need to create and we need to have more platform and more activities to show this work. So that's also another point. Is very important to also, I think, look at the region, what's happening in Indonesia, what's happening in Singapore. We had the opportunity to have these speakers and different institutions from France. We had speakers from China in this conference. But here we're really looking forward in that next forum to discuss more about what do we really need here in Malaysia to support the artist, to create also maybe a better understanding, but also creating platform among all the professionals here in Malaysia.
Yeah, artists, and the idea that artists and economics have been at odds is actually a bit of a construct, because traditionally artists have always had patronage and support of some kind or another. Otherwise, artists could not live and could not make their work. So the idea is to recognize the different diverse communities that are at play and to create, some visibility for these artists and support to really be able to show their work, to imagine larger projects, more exciting projects, and that people recognize what's really going on their own doorstep.
Having said that, how would you describe the art economy landscape here in Malaysia?
Well, the situation here is very emerging. We are in a situation where we were just talking about it today. We hear that a lot of things are happening, and it is things happening. in many ways. But we are very, very in the line, and we're really starting from somewhere. We're in Malaysia. We got great artists. We got institutions who are, I believe, willing to see things moving up, more maybe looking at the situation to have more exhibitions, more maybe a museum. We don't have a contemporary art museum here in this country. We also so we do have a need here, and so when you have a need, then we need to look at what do we need to create all these platforms so people can get into different situations, let's say. That's why education also is very important.
How, comparing the art industry here to ones that are more mature, in this region like Singapore and Hong Kong, and then internationally you have places like New York and Paris, what parts are currently missing from our landscape? So the Contemporary Art Museum, something like that would be one, I assume. What else?
And a contemporary art museum could take the form of a traditional contemporary art museum, or could take the form of a more kind of institute of ideas, workshop spaces, laboratories, creative laboratories. I think as well that what really needs to happen is what we're trying to create at the forum, and that is some discussion between the different parties that are currently already on the landscape, but how these communities can work together to create dynamic projects and really be informed and supportive of one another's activities.
So far we've been talking a lot about, networks and platforms and things of that nature, but how fair would it also be to say that there is a need to examine the notion of an art economy because of the idea that art should be commercial products that can kind of contribute towards a country's GDP in much the same way as, for example, investing in cars or investing in palm oil?
I mean, again, the idea that art and economy are completely at odds with one another, and thriving art and thriving economy don't go hand in hand, is not necessarily the case. If you look at what happened in Indonesia in February, literally they split off from the Ministry of Tourism an entire ministry of the creative economy. Creative economy meaning arts of all different types, publishing, media, performance, theater, dance, music, as well as the fine arts. And it's in recognition that actually there is an investment that you can make that will have not only a cultural flourishing dividend, but also a financial one. This is one of the reasons why Claude Mola was such an interesting keynote speaker at the conference, because he was able to show that in the investment that the French have made in the culture on a provincial or regional level, as well as at a central level since the 70s and 80s, has paid off hundredfold in terms of their tourism dollars in cultural tourism today.
But I like to just point about Indonesia. It's very interesting, actually, because I like to say that it is also a recognition of what the private sectors and what also the artists and the professionals are doing. And, we see, I had the opportunity to live in Turkey, and Turkey is also a very good example on a country where we'll say then 20 years ago was nothing, and the government didn't really see the interest or the importance of supporting artists or art in general. Of course, it's a certain recognition, but in terms of economy, or how can we get business from that, then, and today Turkey changed a lot because collectors, also corporations have been taking their responsibility on investing and creating platforms. And today, of course, the government is coming up with this great smile and of course, want to support all these activities. And I think this is what we see in Indonesia.
Yeah, I think so in Indonesia, especially because you find the importance of the artist collective and the particular role that collectors who have become also then curators and have their own private museums have taken in really supporting the artist on a long-term basis, collecting their work in depth and doing publications in-house. This has made a huge difference in Indonesia. But I do take your point as well. What comes to mind is the number 3 or 4, I think, tourist attraction in Manhattan, in New York City right now, is the High Line, which is a project that was privately funded by a foundation, by the public, to take a space of New York and create something out of it.
It is a lovely place to be, actually.
Yeah. And now the Whitney Museum has just opened.
Just opened, yeah.
And it is completely changed this entire area of New York City.
Is it fair then also to say that when we say art economy, it's perhaps we're dealing with more intangible outcomes than when you're saying something compared to when you're comparing it to something that comes off a production line, because that has sort of a clear end consumer and then it goes out into the market, whereas what we're describing here, I guess, is kind of something happens and then the ripples go out and you don't necessarily know how far the ripples will go. Or is there a clear direct line between point A to point B?
I think a bit of both. If you look at some of the, especially the work of the British Council, for example, they've done a lot of research about how to value the impact of investment in the creative economy. And they have come up with actually different ways to both qualify and quantify what the outcome of such an investment would look like. So people are trying to make more clear those lines that you brought up. At the same time, we are talking about education and culture. And those are things that we value beyond a financial direct term, I think.
I'm speaking today with Patrice Vallette, gallery owner, and Charlotte Cousins, a curator and art history scholar. We're discussing art's commercial aspect, or art economy, the creative economy, call it what you will. Up next, we find out perhaps where the concept of arts and economy being at odds came from historically, as well as how a free market plays into all of this. You're listening to Front Row on the Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9. Good afternoon, this is Front Row on the Bigger Picture. I'm Lee Treelin. In the studio with me today, Patrice Vallette, gallery owner, and Charlotte Cousins, curator and art history scholar. We are discussing art economy. It's been quite interesting, just to kind of delineate what exactly we're talking about. And I think something, Charlotte, that you've said quite a bit has been that historically there's been this idea that the two phrases, the two words, even art and economy, are at odds with one another. Where does that come from, that notion that they can't really coexist or they can't work together?
I would say probably it comes from late 18th century, 19th century, actually sort of French philosophy and literature. The idea that the artist is somehow not involved in society, lives somehow on the fringes, has this sort of probably impoverished but rather romantic life, living for their work and starving for their work. And of course, there are many artists who don't have the support they need to make work full-time, to realize the projects that they have in mind. However, the reality is that a lot of the most amazing works that we have today had patronage. A lot of these, also, we don't want to take anything away from the artists themselves. They are masters of their own lives, often very knowledgeable about the economy in which they work, about the networks that surround them, and to say that they're sort of helpless is also not a very fair way to characterize, an artist who's working today and managing their professional career.
Is there still a notion then now somehow that if you try and fit into the art economy as such, that you're somehow pandering or, merely creating crowd pleasers in order to fit in order to be able to make that living?
I think, here we're also talking about entrepreneurship, and this is, I think, also, if we talk about the commercial aspect of the opportunity of investing into structure, into project, I think here in Malaysia is a chance, and this is what we're trying to do with this conference and this forum to get people together, because we find out, and I find out, and there's a lot of people out there who has ideas, who has skills, resources, but we don't know about it. We don't have. We know until we meet these people and we start to talk about the subjects, and then they said, "Well, I have these projects and I have this." So it's really to create this first start from this forum and conference. Actually, this forum will be to prepare the next conference we will do next year. But it's really to get people together, and eventually maybe we will be able to identify it and to see really who is willing to go further by sharing their projects and sharing their ideas, and see how we can get the resources to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think success is not a bad thing. Yeah. So because you make art or because you have a good idea, does that mean that we shouldn't support it?
Just in the name of being a starving starving artist. I guess there's the notion of what an artist considers success. I think perhaps the romanticized version of that is that success is something that isn't necessarily bought with money per se. But when we look at the value of a product and the value of art, the assumption of a free market is that market forces dictate the value of a product. What market forces are at play to value a piece of art?
Well, this is, again, the value of art, and there's an individual sort of process of evaluation you can make. There are some tools, for example, for a recognized artist or an artist who's no longer living. So, for example, then there are tools available to you that you can actually value what everyone else thinks of that artist in terms of looking at the auction record or something like this. But then there's, how do we value art as a community? How do we all agree that we need to support and nurture art as part of a larger culture which has a social and educational value for all of us, as a way to communicate with one another, as a way to understand our own history, as a way to understand our future. So it's a bit of both.
One art historian, Dr. Amir Zekagu, points out that perhaps in an art economy which has free market forces, all these commercial pressures, that the artist perhaps might become something like the farmer, the worker on the assembly line, the people who produce, but not necessarily the people who will be remunerated compared to the people who are instead running the system, so to speak, such as the traders, the galleries, the museums. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think I don't really agree on this idea. Then gallery are using certain situations and or work with artists thinking only about their own interest. I think in terms of, if we talk about business, because this is what we are talking about now, it's about a gallery has its work. Is a professional, and his work is to promote, to support the artist. The artist is here to produce, and I think what the artist he need also, as we need, a certain motivation to continue to do what he does and every day. And he needs space. He needs we can call freedom. Yes, he need freedom. He needs space, and he need to know also where he's going. So. And this is that's why it's important to define who is professionals. It's important to have a real structure, a real a situation where you have different professionals who know each other, who recognize each other, who respect each other. If we talk about gallery, in Singapore we have a gallery association, in Hong Kong as well. In Indonesia, I like to say why it does work very well between galleries and artists and collectors. Of course, it's not perfect, but it does work very well. It's because everybody knows each other and respect whatever everybody is trying to do. A collector, a gallery, an artist has different tasks.
Roles.
Yeah.
And I think instead of thinking about this system as a linear one, where you see a product coming from the origin and then going to the end, we should think about it more as a circular or ecosystem, where there are interactions crossing between all the players within this community that allow for the kind of support that Patrice is talking about.
What are the dangers of thinking of the arts as part of the economy? I guess for me, one that leaps to mind is the idea that if the artist is meant to be an Asian provocateur, so to speak, that perhaps if you try to fit them into this space, into the support, into this platform, that role might perhaps be lost.
I have a question for you. What are the dangers of thinking about the artist as not as part of this economy? Meaning that they have no support, they are not recognized, their role as provocateur doesn't get seen, doesn't end up provoking anything.
I think the idea there is that perhaps you would hope that they would exist externally from the economy as such, that you would have an economic system, but that they wouldn't necessarily be a part of it. They would have their own platform. But then I suppose if we're talking about platforms, I guess an argument could be made that they are one and the same. Because if we're talking about economy here, the platform is the economy. Is that sort of the equivalent statement?
Well, we're talking about different platform. To do an economy, you need to have different platform. You cannot define the economy as one platform. I think we are creating the economy, and the artist is also creating the economy every day, and because before anything, we are living in the same planet, same society, and we all consume products, and so we're creating economy. And the artist is just a part of this economy as we are part of this economy.
Yeah, and art, as much as I understand, that it's nice to think of art as separate from life and being able to orbit around it and comment on it. In fact, art is part of life. So, like an electron, as soon as you try to chart it, you actually have moved its position. It's always part of the system as well. An artist, cannot be, they will have a point of view, but they cannot be completely taken out of the world in which they are living and responding to.
For me, art is so necessary. It's so much a need in my life every day, and it's the same thing, certainly for my children. I think that's a complete. It's a complete part of what we need in life. How can we imagine to live this life without art? That's
And part of that would be helping artists to continue producing art, which is the notion here. Then.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the goal. Now, of course, there's going to be challenges. Of course, there's going to be people who has different vision or different ideas or different objective. But at the end of the day, that's what we should look at. And a part of what's going on around the world, I think it's very positive that we are talking more and more about art, more and more about what the auctions houses are doing. Of course, we need the rules and regulation. Of course, we need people. So that is why certainly why we are doing what we are doing right now.
And that's why inviting all these different people to the forum in September is so important, so that everyone really has an idea to pull all these ideas together, discuss them freely. There's room for all voices, and especially the artists.
Yeah, and that's very, very important, because in the first conference we had over 40 artists, and we're looking forward to even have much more. Yeah, of course.
Who are you hoping will be attending the forum? Who are you inviting? Who are the faces and voices that you're hoping to see?
Well, we are inviting all the professionals, institutions. Professionals goes from galleries, curators, writers, institutions. So we have partners like ITBM, who's a Malaysian publisher and translation directly with Minister of Education. You have the Razak School of Government, so that's really a total different. So they are also organizer. UPM, who is an university, more focused on architecture and design. UITM, so all the universities are invited. And as I say, the professionals, the artists, corporations, everyone who are interested directly and indirectly to see Malaysia to grow and and support art in all forms, because I think it's important. We didn't put an S on art, but I think that's also very important to talk about, not just about art, but arts and such.
The creative economy.
Yes, creative economy.
And so this forum would naturally then just be part of an ongoing conversation, as you've mentioned, right? There was a forum before, and there will be forums to come.
Yes, we actually had this conference, and now a forum will be more a discussion. We'll have some key note speakers. We'll have with Charlotte, she will be the moderator with 2 or 3 speakers by panel, but we will be really in that forum discuss with the audience and have really creating really discussions between everyone. Preparing also our next conference next year, who has for objective to get together more professionals from this region.
The Art Economy Forum will be taking place on Tuesday, September 15th, 2015 at the Faculty and Architecture Auditorium over at University Putra Malaysia. It's organized in collaboration with the university's Razak School of Government. I have been speaking today with Patrice, Vallette gallery owner, and Charlotte Cousins, curator and art history scholar, on the subject of art economy and the creative economy. Thank you both very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Front Row on the Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.